Hello, my name is Bruce Wayne, and welcome to another episode of My Great Adventures. When I was almost 8 years old, we're still living in Edgewater, and I remember my parents were interacting with each other. Seemed like they weren't getting along because I heard them kind of arguing with each other. Not to say if you don't have 5 kids, then that you wouldn't be arguing about something, especially 4 boys. And my mom went on vacation to the United States. And while she was on vacation in the United States, my father disappeared for several days, and we were wondering what happened to him because we were all alone. And me being the youngest and my oldest brother being maybe 14 or 15, I think maybe closer to 16, 15 or 16. And so we were wondering, well, where did Dad go? Because we're alone. And then after several days, my father showed up, and he showed up with this woman. And I remember her having a short afro, which was the style of that particular era. And my brother said, "Oh, that's Daddy's girlfriend." And that didn't really make any sense to me because, Mom was on vacation in the US. And so shortly after that, he started to pack up the furniture, and systematically while we were at the house, he was moving the furniture. So we understood that we were moving to somewhere else. And so each day, less and less of the furniture was in the house because it was being moved out, and the woman was helping him to move the furniture out. I remember very distinctly this because it was my 8th birthday, and by the time they got to my crib, and yes, in Jamaica, even though I was 8 and didn't belong in a crib, just because you had 5 kids, it was just a matter of convenience. I could still fit in that crib. It was a pretty big size crib, I guess. And so, so I remember them selling the crib. I think I slept in the crib some of the time, but basically it's like a grown-ass man in a crib. But that was where I slept. And I remember them taking the crib and dismantling it. And then I remember my father giving us $5. And the $5 back then, I think it was like a reddish color, so I really kind of remember that. It was $1 for each of my siblings. And he sent us to our grandparents' house, and we never saw him again for 15 years. So I'd like to tell you what happened during that time. So we were on this adventure now. We were like, "Where's Mom?" But we didn't even have time to think about that. So we went ahead and my grandfather lived in Rock Hall, which is located in St. Andrew, the parish of St. Andrew. And we got on several buses to get there. And when we got there, at the time, my grandparents, just a little background on my mother's side, they were doing very well for themselves. At one point, up in Rock Hall, in that section, the family and extended family owned a lot of the property up on that mountain. It's on top of a mountainside. And so pretty much most people were somehow related up there. And what they did was they farmed the land. A lot of them farmed the land, and they did that. There was another place that they went to do farming, and it was called Sandy Gully. And Sandy Gully was where all the farmers would go and plant all these amazing foods. And so, and my grandparents at the time, they had a small grocery store, and they had 10 kids, but by then most of the kids had moved away by the time we got there. And the store that they had livestock. When I was much younger, they had livestock. They had cows and goats, and they sold chickens and eggs, and they sold vegetables and produce at the grocery store there. And they were the pillar of the community. They had a lot of land. They even donated some to the church. And my grandmother was a pillar of the community. She really was the matriarch of that community. It was like a thread that kind of held the entire family of 10 siblings to get 10 children plus her husband and extended family who always stopped by. She was the thread that kind of linked everybody together, not just in her own family, but in the entire neighborhood. So when she died of I think it was ovarian cancer or something related to that particular area, the you know it really sort of fragmented the entire neighborhood. People used to get together all the time, stop interacting with each other. Family members didn't come around much, and my grandfather essentially kind of checked out. So by the time we got to Rock Hall, where he was really not there. We were sort of just there. We got there, and there was no plans at all because this happened very abruptly. I was even unaware whether or not my mother was aware of it, because at that time, it's not like you had a cell phone or Facebook or something that you could send a quick message. It took a while. You typically communicated by letters, or maybe somebody could make a phone call, but typically it's not something that happened very quickly. And so over the next several months, we actually lived at Rock Hall. And when we got there, one thing was very obvious. There was no money for food anywhere. And my grandfather didn't seem, for whatever reason, it's not like he was an uncaring person, he just checked out. And for whatever reason, we had to fend for ourselves because there's just 5 city kids showing up at Rock Hall. And this is where the skill sets for each of us that we'd learn along the way really came in handy, because being a bunch of city kids, we got to Rock Hall, and essentially the place that my grandfather lived, just to sort of give you the layout, it was the bedroom were 2 separate bedrooms. The home was 2 separate bedrooms, and then the kitchen was this separate kind of zinc thatched kitchen with a zinc roof on it, and with a kerosene stove in there that had long stopped being used as a kerosene stove. Everything was in shambles at that point. The store was no longer there anymore. The livestock was gone, and we saw the chickens running around on the property there. The area that used to be the kitchen, like I said, was no longer working, and the area where the chicken coop was now where they were cooking. And so they were cooking by wood fire, so they had 3 rocks there, and that's how they were cooking at that point. There was no electricity there at all, and so there was no food and nothing, and we didn't know anyone, and that's how we started off at Rock Hall. And so after the first day getting there, Colin, my oldest brother, the one I said he was a genius, he really was. It was a good time to have the genius. And he says, look, you look down the gully, because there's a gully there, and it had a bunch of bottles that were there. And these are like soda bottles. And he says, we could wash these bottles, because what had happened is that for probably 50 years that the store was there, people would buy sodas and then threw the bottles down the gully. So for years and years and years, there was an accumulation of bottles there, soda bottles, and so sort of like soda cans. And so Colin said, well, maybe what we can do is wash these bottles, okay, and then redeem them at the store. And so we started to wash them, we had to dig the bottles out of the dirt. I mean, because parts of it's like an artifact, and we were going through digging them out, making sure that they don't break, and we had to take dirt or gravel and shake it to shake out the dirt that was inside of it and wash it. And so we actually went, that's where 5 kids come in handy, and we had a little manufacturing plant going, and we got a whole bunch of bottles, and then we washed them and took our first round down to the local grocery store, and we traded that in to get some food. And so that's how it all began, how we figured out how to get certain items for food. And by the way, the one thing that was interesting about Rock Hall is that because farming was the issue, the sort of means primarily at the time, the old timers had planted a whole bunch of vegetables and every different type of fruits you can think of, from grapefruit to oranges to limes to tangerines to a different type of apple that's called Otiiti apple, which is a famous apple in Jamaica, and plums and guava and tamarinds, bananas, and what's called dasheen, which are root crop vegetables. There are all of food that was planted in abundance, and mango trees, you name it, avocado trees, they're all there on his property. And so what we didn't have, and then we saw the chickens running around there, and so we decided, well, we have to figure out where the chickens are laying their eggs. And so eventually we started to figure out where some of the chickens were laying their eggs, and so we get eggs that way. But but actually getting on a regular basis, what we began doing more consistently is that we would actually wash the bottles and take them down to the stores and trade them in for either flour or mostly chicken. And it wasn't just chicken breast, it was chicken back, because in Jamaica, that's what you bought at the time. So you get a half a pound of chicken back, for example, and that would be good for one person. And you would basically go to the thing that we threw away in the United States. Here we are in Jamaica, picking through that, trying to make some food out of it, which would have given my mother a heart attack. So this went on for months in the meantime, and I'm not sure at what point my mom got word as to what was going on about it, but it was very obvious from this side, when being older now and talking to my mom, that she felt like there is no way for her to come back to Jamaica and be able to take care of 5 kids. Since she had been out of work for so long and been a stay-at-home mom, it would have been impossible to generate that kind of resource to take care of 5 kids. So she decided that she was going to stay in the United States and work to get us to the United States. On the opposite end of it, we stayed in Rock Hall, and over the next several months, my mom would start to send some money to Jamaica. But that took a while, and months going by with kids with no resources, that's problematic. And so we lived off the land, and we got ourselves a reputation because we're a bunch of city kids. And so the people in that neighborhood, they start to call us the bad breed Rosses. Rosses being my last name, Bruce Wayne Ross is my last name. And the reason why is because we were influencing a lot of the young kids that was in that neighborhood in a way where there was a lot of superstition, and we were able to debunk that and say, that's nonsense, and the parents did not like that, because they used that superstition as a form of control to keep their kids in line. So after a while, we got to the point where we sort of began exhausting the actual amount of food supplies that we had within proximity of where we were. And so there was another place that the old timers went to plant foods, and this was their main area that they farmed, and it was called Sandy Gully. And Sandy Gully, if you thought that my grandparents' property had a lot of fruits and vegetables and it was abundant with all type of foods, Sandy Gully was like the apex of that. It had everything, and not only did it have my grandfather had property down there, all the cousins and uncles, everybody that lived up in Rock Hall, and the old timers had all gone down to Sandy Gully over the last 50 however amount of years, and they'd farmed the land down there. And then what happened is that they got older and they retired. And then the next generation never actually, they had no interest in farming. So all that land for miles and miles and miles filled with all this produce just sat there, and the fruits would grow and ripen and rot, and nobody cared. So we decided, well, let's go down to Sandy Gully. And so we actually, and Sandy Gully is not that close. And so, it was pretty several miles away, not just like 5 miles away, it's like 20 miles away. And I forgot how far it was, but it was very far away from where we were. And so what we decided to do was, we actually ran. So it's, we run for a walk, and then we'd run down the hill, and you get to the entrance Sandy Gully reasonably quickly, but then it extends beyond that all the way. You can follow from Sandy Gully, and if you keep going, you can end up practically in another parish. And so what we did is we actually, part of the way there down to Sandy Gully, sometimes we'd hop a truck. So literally like a Mack truck. Yes, now you picture your 8-year-old child and your 10-year-old child hop in a Mack truck, climb while it's driving, and climbing up on it to get inside of there. That would freak you out. but we were fearless, and we actually would hop the truck, and the guy would sometimes look out and see us, and it was kind of a typical thing. They didn't care, and so we'd hop the truck, and then the hard part of it is that what a lot of people don't realize is getting off the truck is sometimes harder, because to get off the truck, you can't just jump off the truck. If you jump off the truck and you land, you'll just face plant. So you have to run with the truck, run your little legs, and then you let go and you keep running, and that's how you got off the truck. And so when we would get to different parts of Sandy Gully, I would be the climber. So if there is a coconut tree, I would climb the coconut tree, and it takes a type of skill sets to get up to a coconut tree. Now, I'm not talking about having a harness and all that stuff. I'm talking about, just hugging the tree and climbing the tree with no safety gear at all, getting to the top. And what was interesting when you got to the top of a coconut tree, for the very few people who have done this, is that when you get to the top of it, coconut tree, some of the branches, the immediate closest one that you reach for, they're not on there very solid sometimes. If you step on them and you miscalculate, that thing will come off and you will fall. And I'm not talking about these little short Florida coconut trees. I'm talking about Jamaica, Sandy Gully, where the trees have been watered every day. They are tall. The coconuts are not these little tiny things. They're these big, huge things that if they fall on you, they're gonna kill you. And so, I have to climb up there and I have to nimbly get beyond those kind of rotted branches that's gonna come off. And then when you get it into the top up there and you're sitting on the top of the coconut tree, there are usually bees in there, which means that you can get stung, which would be terrible, because where are you gonna go? You're literally just sitting in the top of a tree where there's nowhere to go other than death. And then what you would do, you'd start kicking the coconuts off and they'd fall, and people have to get out of the way. And then you climb down the tree. We have no machetes, no instruments of any kind. So we have to take the coconut and break them on a rock and break them open and husk them open. And then that's how we would drink from that. And it's sort of like crazy how it was Lord of the Flies a little bit in some sense. And we were out there, and we would climb a mango tree and sit in the mango tree. Or if we're gonna eat a banana, we would not go to the store to buy a banana. We'd see a banana ripe on the tree and we'd run. It's like a race to get to the banana tree, and we'd slide down the gully on our butts and then jump because it was kind of at an angle. So we'd go down, kind of grab the banana tree and go down, and by the time the banana tree was down, we were already on and we were eating already. So Sandy Gully was that kind of a place, and we went there quite a lot over that timeline there. And it was just a very, very interesting time. And I'd like to tell you a lot more about it in our next episode. I'm going to break this up in maybe 2 or 3 episodes about it.